The cold metal floor burned under Zira's knees, but she didn't dare move. Her wrists were tied in front of her with sharp wire, and her neck had a collar that buzzed if she blinked too slowly. She was one of 12 alien girls on the auction stage, one silent. Thin and defeated, the market smelled of burnt oil, blood, and rotting food. Voices filled the room, some laughing, some angry, some hungry like wild animals. Zira didn't cry anymore. She had no tears left. This was her third master maybe. Fourth, she had stopped counting. Each time she had been sold, it was worse. Pain had become her daily food. Chains her blanket, the auctioneer shouted loudly, "This one, half human blood. Strong back, good genes. Still young, barely matured. Who will take her?" Hands went up, numbers were shouted, coins clicked. Zira stared at the ground. Her ears ringing, she didn't care who won. She already knew what waited for her. Beatings. Dark rooms, cruel hands, and no voice. Then a voice broke through the noise. Calm but firm. "I'll take her," it said. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the shouting like a knife. The auctioneer looked confused, then sneered. "You? You've got enough broken pets. Human, I'll pay in full," the voice said again. Coins dropped on the table, more than expected. Zira was pulled forward, almost falling on her face. The collar buzzed as she was handed to the buyer. She finally looked up, ready to see another rich alien with dead eyes. But what she saw was different. A man stood in front of her. A human male, not too old, not too young. With rough hands and a serious face, he wore worn-out clothes and carried a large sack on his back. His eyes were tired, but not cruel. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't even stare at her like others did. He simply turned and walked away, nodding to the guards to release her. Zira didn't move at first. A guard kicked her softly, and she stumbled forward. Following the man, outside, the sun was weak. Barely cutting through the thick clouds, the planet was dry and cold, mostly mining and slave trading. Zira walked behind him, expecting to be thrown in a cage, maybe tied to a pole. She didn't. Ask questions. Slaves who talked were punished, but something strange happened. They walked and walked and kept walking, far from the slave pits, far from the market, far from anyone. Her legs grew weak, and she started to fall. The man turned around, sighed, and without a word, he reached into his bag and handed her a bottle of water and a small food bar. Zira froze. Food. She had not eaten in 2 days, and even then it was leftover waste. She took it slowly, watching him with wide eyes. Was it a trick? Poison? A game? Still, her stomach screamed louder than her fear. She ate quick at first, then slower as she noticed he was not watching her like a predator. He pointed to a broken-down hover cart nearby and helped her climb inside. She flinched every time his hands got near, but he didn't grab her. He adjusted a blanket around her shoulders and said just one word, "Rest," as the cart moved. Zira held the blanket tight. Her body shook not from cold, but from confusion. Why wasn't she being hurt? Why wasn't she in a cage? Why was she being treated like a person? She peeked at him again. His face was quiet, almost sad. She wondered if he would sell her later, maybe use her until broken. Her heart prepared itself for the worst. But then, the cart stopped. A small metal cabin stood at the edge of the rocky field, not fancy, but clean and real. The man helped her down and walked to the door. Opening it for her, he didn't push, didn't command. He simply said, "Come inside." Zira stepped in slowly, like a scared animal. The warmth hit her first, then the soft light. There was a small bed, some tools, books, a heater, and a kitchen. The man placed his bag down and started cooking real food, not sludge. She stood frozen, unsure what to do. He looked back and said, "You can sit." Zira sat on the floor, knees against her chest. He put a plate on the table, one for her, one for himself. "Eat," he said gently. Zira crawled forward and picked up the spoon with shaking hands. She watched him closely as he ate slowly, not watching her, not rushing her. She whispered, almost unable to believe it, "What do you want from me?" He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Nothing. You're safe now." Zero didn't believe it. Not yet. But something deep inside, her something small and buried, it flickered. Like a tiny light in a long dark tunnel. Not trust, not love, not yet, but maybe, just maybe. Hope. Zero opened her eyes slowly, expecting pain. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the soft blanket over her, the metal ceiling above, and the quiet hum of a heater. She wasn't in a cage. She wasn't tied up. She was in a room, warm and safe. The small cabin smelled like cooked food and old wood. Sunlight peeked through a small window, and dust floated in the air like tiny stars. Her body still ached from long marches and hunger, but nothing hurt her now. She sat up fast, her heart racing. Where was the human? Was it a trap? She tiptoed to the door and peeked out. There he was, outside the cabin, wearing gloves. Fixing something on a broken machine, his face was focused, not angry. She stared at him. For a moment, trying to understand why hadn't he locked her in. Why was she not chained to the wall? Zira stepped back and waited in the corner like she had always done before. After some time, the human den returned, carrying fresh vegetables and some strange root meat. He saw her crouched in the corner, still wearing the same torn clothes. Without saying anything, he handed her clean fabric and pointed to the side room. "You can wash," he said. "There's water." Zira didn't move. She thought maybe he wanted something first. She whispered, "Do I need to earn it?" Dane turned and replied without looking at her, "No, just be clean. You deserve that much." She walked slowly into the bathroom, and when she turned the handle, warm water poured from a pipe. She gasped and touched it like it was magic. For the first time in months, maybe years, she washed her body with real soap. The dirt ran down the drain, along with some tears she didn't notice falling. When she came out, wearing the new clothes, Dane simply nodded. "You look better," he said kindly, and placed a plate of warm food on the table. Zero stood nearby, still unsure if she could sit. "Table," he said, pointing. "Use the chair, not the floor." She sat slowly, carefully, like it was a dream. The food was real soft bread, cooked roots, and some strange but tasty stew. She chewed slowly, watching his every move. Dane didn't stare, didn't order her to serve him. He just ate beside her like an equal. After the meal, Zira picked up the plates and took them to the sink. She looked around for punishment. Maybe she wasn't allowed to touch things. But Dane smiled slightly and said, "You can help, if you want." That evening, he showed her how to use simple tools. He fixed a broken solar panel while explaining how it worked. Zero didn't understand everything, but she nodded and tried to remember. He didn't speak to her like she was dumb. He treated her like someone who could learn at night. He gave her the bed again and rolled out a sleeping mat for himself. Zira felt strange watching a free man choose the cold floor. She whispered, "I can sleep there." He shook his head. "Not tonight. Not ever again." She lay down, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was full of noise, questions, fear, memories. But one thought kept rising above all others. Why? Why was this man kind to her when no one else was? The next morning, Zira woke early and tried to make herself useful. She cleaned the small room, folded her blanket, and even tried to make the stew again. It didn't taste as good as his, but when Dane tasted it, he said, "Not bad," with a small grin. Zira felt something warm inside, something she hadn't felt in so long. Pride. Later that day, Dane brought out a small tablet and placed it in front of her. "Letters," he said. "Tapping the screen, I'll teach you to read." Zira looked at the glowing symbols, confused but curious. "Why?" she asked. "I don't need to read to serve." Dane looked her in the eyes and said, "You're not a servant. You're someone who deserves a future." Zira blinked, trying not to cry. No one had ever said that to her. Not even as a child. Days passed, and each one felt like a strange dream. Zira learned how to grow small plants in pots, how to boil clean water, and even how to write her name in human letters. She began to laugh softly at small jokes Dane made, and sometimes caught herself smiling without knowing why. But one night, she sat near the fire and asked him again, "Why did you buy me?" "I was just nothing." Dane stirred the fire and said, "Because I saw someone who deserved better." That was enough. Zira looked at her hands, clean, soft now, not bleeding. She looked at the stars through the window. She was still scared, still confused, but for the first time, she wasn't alone. The human's home was quiet, small, and far from the galaxy's noise, but for Zira, it felt like the start of something powerful. Not a cage, not a prison, but maybe, just maybe. A home. Zira stood in front of the small sink, holding a clean plate in her hands. She wanted to help. Even if her hands still trembled sometimes, she had watched Dane wash dishes many times now. But this was her first time trying. The plate slipped, hit the edge, and cracked in two. The loud sound echoed through the quiet cabin. Her body froze. Her breath stopped for a second. The world around her disappeared. She wasn't in Dane's home anymore. She was back in that dark cell, back with her second owner who would whip her for even breathing wrong. She dropped to her knees quickly and whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll fix it. Please don't hit me." Dane heard the crash and rushed into the room, but when he saw her curled up, arms over her head, eyes squeezed shut, his heart broke. He didn't yell, didn't ask questions. Instead, he crouched down slowly and placed a soft cloth in her hand. "You're okay, Zira," he said gently. "Just a plate." "That's all." She opened her eyes, confused. He wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. She looked at his face. There was no hate, only worry. He helped her stand up and moved her hands away from her head. Her wrist still had old scars, pale and deep. Dane had seen them before, but never asked. Now, he softly said, "Did someone do that to you?" Zira didn't speak for a long time. Her voice was lost in her memories, but her silence was full of pain. Later that evening, she sat on the floor near the small fire and finally began to talk, slowly. Her words came like drops of rain. "I was taken when I was little. My planet lost the war. They killed the strong ones, took the weak. I never saw my mother again." Dane sat nearby and listened, not interrupting, not pushing. Zira continued, "The first master said I was lucky, but he lied. He beat me if I looked up, said I wasn't allowed to speak unless ordered." She paused and showed him her left arm. Faint marks, like burns, twisted across her skin. "He burned me. Just to see how much I could take," she whispered. Dane clenched his fists, silent rage burning in his chest, but his voice was calm. When he asked, "And the others?" "The second one, he didn't beat me," she said, "but he made me clean everything with no food for days. He said starving makes slaves obedient." Her voice cracked. "I tried to escape once. They broke my ankle and laughed. She looked down, ashamed, but Dane leaned closer and said, "You didn't deserve any of that, Zira." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. I'm still alive. That's enough." "No," Dane said firmly. "Being alive is not enough. You deserve to live." From that day on, things began to change between them. Dane gave her tasks small at first. Nothing hard. He taught her to fix wires, plant vegetables, clean solar panels. Zero learned quickly, even faster than Dane expected. One evening, Dane gave her a book made for children. It had pictures and big letters, and she held it like a treasure. He sat beside her and pointed at each word. "Apple," he said. "This is an apple." Zero repeated softly, "Apple." Soon she could read short sentences and even write her name in human letters. She would smile shyly when she got something right. Each time she smiled, it was like a sunrise in the cabin. One night, they sat outside. Under the stars, Zero looked up and asked, "Do humans always help like you?" Dane gave a sad smile. "No. Some humans are cruel too. But some of us try to be better." Zero nodded slowly and whispered, "I'm glad I met the better one, but not all days were happy." Sometimes Zero would wake up screaming, lost in dreams of chains and fire. She would curl into a corner and cry quietly. Dane would bring her water. Sit beside her without words. He never asked her to stop crying, never told her to be strong. He just stayed, and that was enough. One afternoon, while fixing a broken heating pipe, Zero pricked her finger. Blood ran down, and she flinched hard, expecting a slap, but Dane only said, "Wait here," and returned with a small bandage. He gently wrapped her finger and said, "You're not in danger anymore." Zero looked at the white cloth around her finger. Such a small thing, but it felt like a shield against the whole galaxy. Her silence wasn't fear anymore. It was healing, and for the first time in her life, Zero didn't feel like a slave trying to survive. She felt like a person who was slowly learning to live again. The sun had just touched the edge of the hills when Dane's cabin shook. Zero dropped the tools she was holding, heart pounding. It wasn't a storm, it was a ship loud, humming. Government style, she looked through the window and froze. A sleek silver patrol craft was landing near the trees. The symbol on its side was one she recognized too well: Galactic Labor Enforcement. Her hands began to shake. She backed away from the window and whispered, "They found me." Dane came from the back, carrying a heavy box. He looked out the window, his face turning still, without saying a word. He placed the box down and walked to the wall. He pressed a hidden panel, revealing a small metal door behind the supply shelf. "Zero," he said calmly. "Get inside." She looked at him with wide eyes. "You're hiding me." "Now," he said sharply, but not unkindly. Zero crawled into the hidden compartment, her heart racing. It was small, dark, and smelled like old wood and oil. The door closed quietly, and she was swallowed by silence. Only her breath and fear kept her company. Moments later, the knock came firm and cold. Dane opened the door. Two officers in sharp uniforms stood outside. One was tall and pale. The other had cybernetic eyes, scanning everything. "We're looking for a fugitive," the tall one said. "Female alien, young, part human DNA. Listed as lost property from a trade hub auction 3 cycles ago." Dane kept a straight face. "I live alone," he said. "No one else is here." The officers stepped inside without asking. Zero heard their boots on the floor above her. They opened drawers, checked corners, tapped walls. "She's dangerous," one of them said, "probably hiding. If you're keeping her, you'll face prison or worse." Dane folded his arms. "I haven't seen anyone like that," he said simply. The scanner eye officer stared at him for a long moment, then said, "We'll be watching you." The ship left after 15 tense minutes, leaving behind only dust and silence. Dane opened the secret door slowly. Zero blinked at the light, her body stiff from holding still. She crawled out, shaking, tears building in her eyes. "You lied for me," she said in disbelief. Dane looked tired but calm. "I didn't lie," he said. They didn't deserve the truth. Zero didn't know what to say. Her legs gave out and she sank to the floor. She covered her face and whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't mean to bring danger to you." Dane knelt beside her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't bring danger," he said softly. "They did. You're not the problem, Zira. You're the victim." She looked into his eyes, full of confusion and something deeper. "Why do you care so much?" He didn't speak right away, then slowly said, "My sister was taken when I was young. A mining company needed workers. They grabbed her from the edge of our village." His voice was heavy, full of pain. "No one saved her. I was too young to stop them. I swore that if I ever had a chance to do something right, I would." Zero reached out and touched his arm. It was the first time she had done that without fear. "I wish someone like you had found me sooner," she whispered. That night, the wind outside howled, but inside it was calm, warm, safe. Zero didn't hide in the corner. She sat by the fire beside Dane. Holding the old book he gave her, she read a few words aloud, her voice soft but steady. Dane nodded. "You're learning fast." Zira smiled. A real one this time. It felt like her fear was beginning to break slowly, but surely, the next day. Zero helped Dane build a second room, small but cozy. It was her idea, a place for others. "Like me," she said, "so they don't have to hide in walls." Dane looked at her, surprised. "You want to help others?" Zero nodded. "You helped me. Maybe I can help someone too." He handed her a hammer and said, "Then, let's build." Hope, one room at a time, and just like that, the girl who was once property was becoming something no one ever thought she could be, a protector. Before the sun rose, the cabin was already cold. Zira sat on the edge of her bed, fully dressed, her shoes tied tight. A small cloth bag rested in her lap, filled with bread, water, and a broken compass. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, but from guilt. Dane was still asleep on the floor beside the fireplace. His face was peaceful. Unaware, she stared at him for a long time. He had done everything for her, fed her, sheltered her, protected her, but now she was going to leave. Zero whispered, "I'm sorry," under her breath. She stepped outside, her feet making no sound on the wooden porch. The forest beyond the cabin was dark and thick with fog. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew why she had to go. If the patrol returned and found her again, Dane could be jailed. Or worse, she couldn't let him suffer because of her. He was the only good thing that had ever happened in her life. And that's why she had to leave him behind. Zero disappeared into the trees, the cold biting her skin. Her collar buzzed softly now and then, a cruel reminder from her past. Her legs ached, but she didn't stop. Branches scratched her arms and her shoes slipped on wet rocks. Still, she pushed forward, tears stinging her eyes. Back in the cabin, Dane woke to silence. Something felt wrong, empty. He sat up quickly and called out, "Zira." No answer. He checked the kitchen, the bathroom, the porch, nothing. Then he saw the blanket folded neatly. The book left behind on the chair. His heart sank. She left. He muttered, staring at the empty bed. Without wasting a second, he grabbed a jacket, supplies, and a light tracker device. It beeped softly, showing a weak signal. He had secretly placed a tiny location chip inside her, only to keep her safe, never to trap her. Dane ran into the woods, his boots sinking into mud. "Zira!" he shouted, pushing past trees and slipping down rocky slopes. The signal grew stronger, but time was against him. Zira's legs finally gave out near an icy stream. She fell to her knees, her breath coming in gasps. She had walked too far without rest, and the cold was seeping into her bones. Her fingers turned pale, her lips cracked. She curled into herself, hugging her knees, shivering violently. Maybe this was better, she thought. If she disappeared, Dane would be free. He wouldn't be hunted anymore. He could live a quiet life, safe, simple, without her. But then, footsteps, heavy, fast, Crashing through the brush, Zira opened her eyes and saw a shadow coming closer. Her eyes widened with fear, thinking it was Patrol. But then she heard the voice, Zira. She blinked, hardly believing it. Dane was there, out of breath, covered in scratches. He dropped beside her and pulled off his coat, wrapping it tightly around her freezing body. "You fool," he said. Voice shaking. "You could have died out here." She sobbed into his chest, too weak to reply. "I didn't want to get you hurt," she whispered. "I thought I was protecting you." Dane didn't answer right away. He simply held her tighter and said, "You don't protect people by leaving them to suffer alone." He carried her back through the forest on his back. Zira cried softly, her tears soaking into his jacket. Not because she was in pain, but because she had never known someone would run after her. No one had ever come for her before. Until now, back at the cabin, he placed her by the fire and wrapped her in thick blankets. She coughed from the cold, but slowly warmed. Dane made soup and fed her by hand, never once scolding her, only saying, "You matter too much to lose." That night, Zira couldn't sleep. She stared at the flames and then looked at Dane, who sat nearby cleaning her scratched hands. "Why didn't you let me go?" she asked quietly. "Because you're not a problem," he replied. "You're family now, and family doesn't walk away." Zira's eyes filled again. That word, family. It hit her harder than any slap ever could. She whispered, "Then I won't run again. I promise." Dane smiled for the first time in days. "Good," he said, "'cause I was already building a second room for you." Zira laughed tired. Soft, real, and deep in her heart. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like someone running, hiding, or surviving. She felt like someone worth being found. The smoke came before the sound, a dark column rising into the sky, far beyond the trees. Zira stood on the roof, cleaning the solar panels. When she saw it, her heart skipped, her hands froze. She climbed down quickly and ran inside. "Dane," she said, breathless, "there's smoke, big smoke. Something's wrong." Dane looked up from his tools and walked to the window. He watched the sky carefully. "That's from the trade route." "And not from any farm," he said. Zira stepped closer, her voice low. "You think it's pirates?" Dane didn't answer, but his face did. He opened a crate under the bed and pulled out an old rifle, then a second one, smaller, lighter. He handed it to Zira. She held it awkwardly, confused. "I don't know how to use this," she said, her voice shaking. "You'll learn," he replied, loading both weapons quickly. "If they reach this area, they won't be looking for a fight. They'll be looking for people to take." Zira's stomach turned cold. She had seen pirates before. They didn't just steal things, they stole lives within hours. Refugees started arriving, a mother carrying a baby, a boy limping with burns on his leg, 2 old farmers with dust-covered clothes. Dane opened the door wide and said, "Come inside. Stay low. We'll keep you safe." Zira helped lay blankets, give water, and calm the crying child. Her hands shook at first, but she forced herself to stay focused. Dane handed her a small headset. "Time to be brave," he said gently. That night, the power went out, the heater died, and the lights blinked off. Only the fire kept the dark from swallowing them. Dane stood at the window, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. Zira sat beside the refugees, holding the baby who wouldn't stop crying. She whispered soft words, her voice shaking less now. "I know you're scared," she told the child. "I was too, once. But we're not alone anymore." Suddenly, footsteps outside, then voices rough, laughing, sharp like knives. "Looks like someone's hiding in the woods," one voice said. "Probably slaves or cowards." "Let's flush them out," said another. Zira stood up slowly, placing the baby in the mother's arms. Dane looked at her, surprised. "What are you doing?" "I won't hide," she said. her eyes glowing with something new fire. Dane handed her the smaller rifle again. "I'll cover the front," he said. "You watch the side windows." The moment came fast. One pirate stepped into view. Gray armor, ugly grin, weapon ready. Zira froze. Then remembered Dane's training. Breathe, aim, focus. She pulled the trigger. The shot hit the ground near the pirate's feet. Enough to scare, not kill. He cursed and ran, but more followed, shouting louder, firing wildly. Dane returned fire, pushing them back. The cabin shook from the blasts. But the door held. Zira ducked near the window, firing back with her shaking hands. She saw one pirate fall, and she didn't cry this time. She didn't run. She stood, fighting. The pirates began to retreat, realizing this small cabin was more trouble than it was worth. One threw a smoke bomb before running. When it cleared, the forest was silent again. Inside the cabin, no one had died. A few burns, some bruises, but everyone was alive. Because Zira had helped protect them, she sat down finally, her legs weak. Dane placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were scared," he said softly. "But you didn't let it stop you." Zira looked at her hands. They were dirty, shaking, and smelled like fire. But they had saved lives. "I was broken," she whispered. "I still feel broken sometimes." Dane knelt beside her. "Broken. Things can still be strong," he said. "Sometimes they're the strongest of all." That night, Zira didn't cry. She stayed by the fire, holding the rifle across her lap, not as a slave, not as a victim, but as a protector. And when the little boy she helped earlier whispered, "Are you a soldier?" she smiled gently and said, "No. I'm just someone who refuses to be taken again." The cabin was quiet again, but it was not the same. The walls still had marks from blaster fire. The floor still held black stains from smoke and boots. But inside, there was peace, not because danger was gone, but because it had been faced. And beaten Zira stood by the window, watching the morning sun touch the tops of the trees. She wore new clothes, simple, strong, stitched by her own hands. The rifle was no longer beside her. It rested above the fireplace now, quiet and still, behind. Behind, her laughter echoed. The little boy chased the dog across the floor while the old farmers cooked something that smelled sweet. The mother folded clothes, and the baby giggled from the basket. Dane stood nearby, sipping hot tea, watching everything with quiet pride. Zira turned to him and smiled. "It's almost like a home now," she said. "It is a home," he replied, "for anyone who needs one." She walked over and placed a small carved sign above the door. It read, "Safe place," not in human language, not in alien script, but in a mix of both. Her own design, news of the cabin spread slowly. Other escapees began arriving, quietly, humbly, with eyes like hers once were tired, scared, empty, and Zira met each one with a blanket, food, and soft words. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." Dane and Zira built more shelters around the clearing. Not big, not fancy, just enough. Each one painted with soft colors, grown with flowers and vines. Zira taught young girls how to read. She taught boys how to plant vegetables and fix water lines. She even taught Dane's language to those who couldn't speak it. One night, as the stars stretched across the sky, Zira sat by the fire with Dane. She looked at her hands, once scarred and shaking, now strong and calm. "I never thought I'd get this far," she said, voice low. "I thought I was born only to suffer." Dane didn't speak right away. He tossed a piece of wood into the fire and said, "The galaxy lied to you, Zira. You weren't made for chains. You were made to rise." She smiled softly. "You could have left me that day at the auction," she said. "You could have bought someone else, someone easier." Dane turned toward her. "I didn't want someone easier," he said. "I wanted someone worth saving. Someone worth believing in." Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Tears had fallen for pain before. Now they were falling for love, not the romantic kind, but the kind that builds homes instead of cages, the kind that teaches instead of commands, the kind that stays, no matter how broken you are. The next day, a transport ship landed near the forest. A legal officer stepped out calm, alone, holding a device. Dane stepped forward, cautious. Zero stood beside him, head high, not hiding, not afraid. The officer looked at her and said, "We received your request." The new government recognized the injustice. "You are free now." Zira didn't breathe. "For a moment, free," she repeated. The officer nodded, officially. "You are no longer marked. You can leave this world. Start over anywhere." He handed her a small card, glowing with her ID, her real name, her real birth data, not the slave code she had carried for years. Zero stared at it, speechless. Then, slowly, she smiled and said, "I think I'll stay." The officer blinked, confused. "You're staying?" She nodded. "There are still others like me, still others running. I want them to know there's a place where they can stop running." Dane placed a hand on her shoulder. "She's not just free," he said. "She's building freedom for others too," as the ship lifted into the sky again. Zero looked up and whispered, "For so long, I thought I had no voice. Now I have a future." That night, the fire danced brighter. More children laughed. More food was shared. More songs were sung. Zero stood at the edge of the clearing, staring into the stars. Not as a slave, not as a girl waiting for pain, but as a leader, a light, a new beginning. And when someone asked her, "What changed you the most?" she smiled and answered, "One human. Just one. That's all it took."